All right. Well, welcome everybody to episode 8 of Scar Tissue. We got a great and personally really cool guest we're going to introduce to you today and have a great conversation with. We got the Hulk on today. And no, I don't mean that bullshit CGI generated Marvel Universe Hulk. I'm talking about the real Hulk. Retired Navy SEAL Admiral Tom Richard. Tom, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Wes.
All right. So, yeah, Tom was my he was my boss, and I was his aide de camp back in 1996 to 1998. A couple other really quick things before we jump into his life, just so I want to that really kind of stand out to me for Tom. He graduated Buzz Class 55 in April 1970. Just for the record, the last real Buzz Class is 179, and he received a
excuse me.
to SEAL Team 1. He's nicknamed the Hulk because he could squat and deadlift 500 pounds. I think you held the bench press record in Villanova. What was it? What'd you have?
Competition bench 415.
415, right on. And how long did that record stand in Villanova? Maybe it was like in the 90s, wasn't it?
Probably a couple of days.
Yeah, oh, okay. All right. And then, so following SEAL basic indoctrination training and platoon training, you deployed to South Vietnam with Zulu Platoon from August 1970 to 71, to February 1971. You were also wounded in February of 71 at the end of your tour, of which you were awarded the Bronze Star and a Purple Heart. And I just want to note, January this year, that the Bronze Star is upgraded to Silver Star.
Yes,
so
it was.
congratulations
Yes, it was.
on that. That's really cool. So Tom, like I said, pleasure having you on. Let's start at the beginning. Let's get into you born and raised in Bayshore, New York.
Let me just back up to
You
your reference about the upgrade of the Bronze Star to Silver Star.
You bet.
Years ago, a good friend of mine, and I were sitting around shooting the breeze as SEALs will do, and I told him the war story.
Right.
I didn't really have to embellish it much. It's a pretty good story.
Yeah, we're going to get into that.
But when I told my friend, fellow SEAL, retired Captain Mike Slattery, we had actually had this conversation on active duty, and Mike said, that's that level of recognition that you received. He said he personally didn't feel that it was right, and that any number of other folks that he talked to in the community felt the same way. I said, well, Mike, I do sort of personally feel the same way, but I'm not about to beat my chest and do that. At that point in time when we first shared that was probably when I was in 06, and that's not exactly appropriate.
Right.
So Mike said that he wanted to do something about it and get that reviewed and potentially upgraded. On that operation, it wasn't until years and years later I realized that several other individuals received awards that I did not feel recognized their contributions to the fact that I am still breathing, and several of the other guys in that platoon are still breathing. So I said to Mike, Mike, I know you want to do this because of our personal relationship, but I think we need to address all three of us. We need to address Petty Officer Lawrence, Petty Officer Hedge as well. If you will agree to do that, I'll give you everything I can, and we'll dig up witnesses, etc. So Mike, and it's a hell of a process to go through, but Mike did it not only for me, his friend, but for the other two troops in the squad that didn't get the right recognition. Unfortunately, SECNAV's review board did not see fit to recognize an increased award for one of the guys, but they upgraded mine and one individual. But at least we got everybody's looked at.
Right. That's the one thing that working for you those couple of years back in the late 90s, the one thing that I learned from you was that aspect of servant leadership. And that, to me, that just really a great example of, it wasn't about you, it was about the whole group trying to make sure you got the right look and the right review, and hopefully you got the right result at the end of the day. So that's, again, thanks for bringing that up. It was a great. We'll get into the story itself, because that's one of my favorite stories you tell, especially biting the bullet. Anyway, we'll get that in a second. I call you a legend in teams. All you guys, whether, the Roger Haydens, the Mike Martins, the Kirby Harrells, people like that are legends of the teams. And I felt very fortunate that I came in, early enough to at least get a taste of what you guys could bequeath to us as far as like carrying on a legacy. So going back to the beginning for you in New York, let's talk about your childhood a little bit. Some of the things that stuck out to you on why you went down the path of the SEAL teams. I mean, everybody's got their own path to get there, and so let's talk about Bayshore. What some of the things that popped out to you? What some of the lessons learned you had out there, and as you getting ready to go on to Villanova, just what do you got there?
Well, as you noted, born and raised Long Island, New York, south shore of the island. Not that that's any comparison to the north, except geographically, because on the south shore of Long Island, we had the Atlantic Ocean. On the north shore, they had the Long Island Sound. The Atlantic Ocean had waves. The Sound had ripples. So the childhood home was just a few feet from a canal. Me and a couple of good friends had some small boats, and we'd run over to Fire Island and we'd spend our weekends in the water. But even before that, Mom and Dad had a little bungalow out in the Hampton. Now, before anybody gets all excited about what a wealthy family I come from, that was 60 years ago. The Hamptons were not the destination 60 years ago that they are today. There was a certain amount of money out there, but we lived in a town called Hampton Bays, and we went to a beach club on the ocean front, where the lifeguards got tired of pulling Mrs. Richards' little boy Tommy out of the surf. On the South Shore of Long Island, 3 to 4 foot is probably a regular day, and good days 5 and 6 was not uncommon, and so that's a lot of water, and so I was fearless. I don't know if you want to call
That's
that
surprising.
Whether it was a mental defect or whatever. So as it turns out, one of the lifeguards literally lived next door, and Dick McChesney was about 6'6", somewhere around 275, 280 pounds. Just a mountain of a man. And so Dick comes over one evening, and he and my dad are sitting at the picnic table, and Dick says, "Russ, would you mind if me and the other guys taught Tommy how to swim?" And long story short, Dick McChesney, lifetime good friend, unfortunately recently deceased. But we became, as a result of that hero worship that I had at that time, we became good friends through life. And I forget which Bud's class it was, but there was an officer, Berrien. What was his first name? Bill Berrien? And he was from the island. Well, his parents knew Dick McChesney. So I'm there at Berrien's graduation, and his mom and dad come up to me. I didn't know them from Adam. His mom and dad come up to me and says, "Well, we know the guy that taught you how to swim and takes credit for you being a SEAL." And I did one of these double takes. Who the hell are you? Where did this come from? And we had a good laugh. They were good friends of the McChesneys. Yeah. But Dick taught me how to swim, and I was 7, 8 years old. By the time I was 10, being a water rat yourself, you understand. You wait for the big stuff, and that's hurricane season. Well, that's where we are right now.
Right.
And hurricane season. Even if it passes offshore, you're going to get some good waves. I was in there a year or two later with the lifeguards, body surfing during hurricane season, and just from then on, I was just an absolute total water rat.
Right. So, what are some of the lessons that kind of helped you go down the road to were you thinking about being a SEAL at that point, or was that more in the college years?
It wasn't until the college years, but when I got to Villanova, I went to Villanova on the ROTC scholarship, and I got there and I started looking at the Navy. Where would I fit into the Navy? As I mentioned, I had a small outboard boat while I was in high school.
Right.
I had to cut lawns and be a lifeguard to earn the money to buy that.
Right.
But I was oriented towards the water, small boats. So I'm looking at PT 109 had been decommissioned by then. And
what year was this?
I arrived at Villanova in '65.
Okay. I was born that.
Oh my God! But I am not a product of the '60s, boys and girls. I never smoked any of those funny cigarettes. I never had any desire for any of that. Life was too good to live and too important. But I started looking around the Navy. What fits, what works. What's the small boat Navy? And at that point in time, the small boat Navy was, I believe, the Asheville class craft. That one of our CNOs was actually later a CNO was a commanding officer of one of those Asheville craft ships. So okay, that's 165 foot, and you're not going to get lost on that. And I looked around some more, and I see this UDT business. They got paid for working with explosive, swimming in the water, jumping out of airplanes, and working around small boats. And I said that looks like a fit to me. And so I started talking to the staff at Villanova. Unfortunately, they didn't seem to know very much about it, about the qualifications, what you needed to do, etc. But we went into the BUPERS manual at the time, figured it out, and I applied for orders, and I showed up, completely ignorant of what I had signed my fat ass up for at that point in time, and I was in a mild state of shock, but it was absolutely the right choice.
So what made it the right choice? So looking back, growing up in Long Island, besides obviously being in the ocean and being comfortable in the water, what are some of the, because everybody that has been through SEAL training really understands it's more of a mental game than it is a physical. It's obviously definitely physical, but if you don't have the mindset to get through it, you're not going to get through. So what got you there? What are some lessons learned that kind of kept you, since you didn't know what you're getting into?
Well, what I'll say was what got me into Villanova in the first place. My father, a retired policeman, he spent like 42 years on the job, and he taught me some pretty valuable hard work ethics. When dinner was over, I went out of the kitchen to the dining room, and I did my homework until I was done. Whether I was going out for a sport at the time, football or wrestling, I'd come back and I would do the homework, whatever it was. And fortunately, I liked things like math and physics. It was interesting. So that was a big help. But Dad instilled that work ethic in me, and I'll admit that I lost my path my first semester at Villanova, but and I like to comment on that a little bit more. But I had that work ethic, and I mentioned the football and the wrestling.
Right.
Team sports, to a degree. Wrestling, you had to have some very strong individual capability. But everybody on the team who wasn't in the match at the time is standing on the sidelines cheering you on.
Yeah.
And they want you to succeed. So those experiences were a big help, very big help.
Okay. I guess one thing I wanted to kind of pull a string on a little bit. It's interesting. I don't know if you knew this, but we were looking at the demographics of who makes a most successful candidate going through SEAL training. And at one point, this is I'm dating, this is probably 10, 12 years ago. At one point, we got it down to wrestlers out etiquette. And I think it goes back to what you're just saying, the independence, but also mixed with that team support. Everyone has to perform at a really high level because it's all on you when you're out there. But without that team support, you're not going to be as strong going out there as an individual. So I think that's it's an inherent thing. And what do you think about that? Just to kind of.
I'd really like to build on what you said about the mental requirements to get through BUD.
Sure.
I've got any number of expressions. You'll hear a few today.
Yeah.
One is that everything from the neck down is a life support system for the neck up. So when you're going through SEAL training, your legs feel like soggy telephone poles. Are so heavy. I used to get a hell of a stitch in my side running in the soft sand, and those are physical pains. But the only way you overcome them is to engage your mind and say, "I can do this." Getting through SEAL training takes focus, takes personal commitment, sacrifice, and a willingness to endure pain, and consistency over time. You really have to have that mental approach that I can do this. One of the things, you've heard the expression, how do you eat an elephant? How do you graduate from buds? You eat an elephant one bite at a time. You graduate from buds one evolution at a time. Becomes one day, becomes 1 week, so on. You have to take it a piece at a time. It's all so hard. You're absolutely mind-numbingly cold. And so you have to say, okay, I'm cold. Next, and you have to do it here. I'm sure you remember probably standing still, cold as you've ever been in your life, shivering like a jackhammer. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm not kidding. I can remember those experiences. And you endure it. You put up with whatever it is that is thrown at you. We can talk about any number of the reasons why, but they call it war because it's not a picnic. There's no picnic baskets spread around out there in Afghanistan. It's war. There are no timeouts. You have to continue to do whatever it is that you're doing, regardless of the circumstance. And everybody else in that special operations element, whether it's SEALs, Green Berets, you name them, everybody in that element is depending upon everybody else in that element to have that mindset. You just have to, be able to drive on. And I will personally tell you that there were times in training that I was amazed at how badly my side hurt from running. And I would tell you that what I said to myself at that time, I would say to myself, is that all you got? Is that all you can hurt me? Come on, let's keep doing it. I was the worst long distance runner in my training class. But when we did the sprint from the PT circle to the pull-up bar, the first guy to the pull-up bar didn't have to drop down in the leading rest and knock out 20 push-ups. I never did push-up. No matter who I was sprinting to the pull-up bar with, I was first.
Right on. One thing I would add to that, the other unique feature that I've seen from our community is that when you were talking about, miserable, cold, and wet, you also find humor in those situations. I remember the hardest I've ever laughed is when the shittiest situation we've ever been. And just start looking around and just, you just start laughing. And it's just, when you find that humor, you can get through it, right? And that was one of the things that helped me get through too. Besides the focus on the mental aspect, was just starting laughing at, okay, yeah, here we go, let's get after it, right? And finding that humor.
One of my instructors was Master Chief Terry Moy, who was a bit of a legend in the teams as well. And one day we were in a goon squad. Goon squad is when, I believe the correct term is remedial PT. I was in a goon squad.
Pays to be a winner.
And then Chief Moy was one of the instructors, and he's making us do push up, squat thrusts, you name it, until we can't move. And there's something called the duck walk, which is kind of like you squat down and you walk in that mode. And I was not moving quickly enough for Chief Petty Officer Moy's satisfaction during this particular mind-numbing event. And he says, "What the hell are you giving it there, Ensign Richards?" And I look up. Chief Moy, feared instructor that he was, and I looked up and I said, "Would you believe a sick duck?" Chief Moy had to turn around, but I could see his shoulders shaking as he was laughing at this guy who was in dire straits making a joke.
Oh, that's awesome.
but let me talk a little bit more about what gets you through training.
Yeah.
As you know, I was a commanding officer of the Naval Special Warfare
Training
Training Center.
going through that time.
So we were, to your point about wrestlers from Connecticut.
Yeah.
Well, I was a wrestler from Long Island.
Yeah.
That's just across the Sound.
Correct.
So okay, we're in the right place. But so I said to myself, who's graduating? Who's making it through? What are some of the challenges that they face? Well, anyway, long story short, the students that came to Buds from the Naval Academy had the highest graduation rate at that point in time.
Yep.
They were well prepared. So I said, okay, what contributes to that? Well, just stop and think about the Naval Academy. The Naval Academy is a hard place to get into. It's
let me in. So.
Well, Wes, it happens. But that's a hell of an accomplishment in and of itself. I mean, there thousands and thousands of young men and women apply, and they're weaned down for a number of reasons. Okay, so that's the first thing that a Naval Academy attendee and hopefully later a graduate has to do. They have to get selected, and it's not only grades, it's other things that you're involved in, whether it's sports, student government, and those type of things that the Naval Academy looks at, because they are looking for future leaders. So you have already demonstrated something to get accepted to the Naval Academy. So there's the first thing. You set your mind on a goal, and you focus and you accomplish that. Goal setting, figuring out how to focus and accomplish that goal. Goal setting was usually important. Okay, so you get to the Naval Academy, and you start out in plebe year, and you are not even a lower life form. That would be a raise. So you have all those challenges of plebe year, etc., to get through. That weeds out those, again, without the mental fortitude, toughness, focus, dedication, commitment to get through. Okay, everything I just said is exactly what you need to get through Buds. Okay, so you continue through through your years at the Naval Academy, and you're getting ready to graduate. The ability for the Naval Academy midshipman to select what he wants to do in the future is based on his or her class standing. Okay, there are only X number of billets to SEAL training from the Naval Academy. Same thing for flight training, same thing for nuclear power school, etc. So if you want to get your warfare assignment that you're looking for, you've got to be paying attention. Goal setting, focus, dedication, commitment. Okay, there you are. You've done all that. And okay, you're in the top 75 folks in your class. The academy graduates about 1,100 students. Okay, 1,100. And in order to guarantee that you're going to get nuclear power school or Buds training, you figure I've got to be in the top probably 100, maybe even less. And let's say top 100 of the students coming out of there. That's the top 10% of a group of people who have been selected through one of the most arduous processes to even attend the academy in the first place. So you're weaning out, you're not weaning out anybody. Anybody who completes the Naval Academy. I don't want to refer to them that way. You are you're excelling on your own, and you're meeting those goals, and you are starting to stand out from others. If you're in that top 10% of that Naval Academy class, you get your assignment to BUDS, you get your assignment to flight training, or whatever it is. So the Naval Academy students have had an incredible selection process throughout their, albeit short career, as coming out of there as a college graduate. They have had some exceptional challenges put in their way already at the ripe old age of 21. They have set goals and attained them. They have sacrificed. They have focused, and those are exactly the mental skill sets that it takes to get through BUDS. Yes, you have to have the basic physical skills, and all right, I'll admit it, they're far above the basic physical skills. But just like you, we had I'm sure you experienced in your class, we had a junior college championship miler who ran a mile in, let's say, 4:10, maybe 4:12. Who knows what it was?
Often the guys that go away first.
Yep. And since he wasn't running in those cute little nylon running shorts and the Adidas or New Balance shoes, he was out of there in a matter of weeks.
Right.
Me, who you time with a sundial or a calendar, I was still there at the end, and that's the key. That Naval Academy graduate was going to focus, he was going to meet his goals, and he was going to get to BUD. They graduated at that point in time, as I was looking at my statistics, and clearly it made an impression on me. 75% of those individuals from the Naval Academy graduated. That was amazing, and I blame that on the selection process and every step that a Naval Academy midshipman has to go through in order to attain the next set of goals. It's boom, goal setting, achievement, goal setting, achievement. That's what you need.
Right, and I remember, they were talking about because this is still the attrition rate still around 70-75%. Even with they took those concepts and they applied it. That's why you have at going through basic training in the Navy, they have the cell there that basically mentors people getting ready to go to SEAL training. And now the Academy has mini BUDS, they call it, to where you get even more preparation. And I think the more prepared you are, the more prepared you are, and you get tested. And I think that's, for me, that's key. And I think that mostly the attrition, I would imagine, comes from a lot of injuries at this point, where things you can't account for. I know they got the psychological test down pretty well too, so if you have the psychological aptitude, is pretty accurate as far as who can get into it. So all that being said, and I love how you encapsulated all that for those lessons learned. Okay, so now you get out of BUDS. Let's get into the SEAL teams. We're got a lot of stuff here. We go over that. Yeah. So going back to Vietnam, I remember we had the conversation at one point when I was working for you. We had talked about Vietnam and in reference to the movie Apocalypse Now, and the quote that I love from you was, Wes, that was not my Navy. So if you want to talk about Vietnam, getting there, just kind of go over all that.
Absolutely, Wes. That was clearly Apocalypse Now and some of those other movies about the Vietnam experience of mostly Army folks, but the Apocalypse Now had the small boats and all that other happy stuff. Right. But again, that was not my Navy. That was not my war. That was not my armed forces. As a SEAL or a special operations individual, you are well trained and you know what to expect. I volunteered, whether it was for the ROTC scholarship, I volunteered to go through SEAL training, and I'm volunteering for all kinds of other stuff throughout my career. That's who you have in the teams, as well as we were just discussing the trials and tribulations of succeeding at BUDS. But I was prepared. SEAL basic indoctrination. I was taught weapons and tactics by SEALs who had recently returned from that part of the world. SEALs who knew what was going on at the time, how best to operate, tactics, techniques, and procedures, that would go as far as you could in preparation for success. I was prepared to go to Vietnam. So many of the folks who were drafted, not only were they not prepared to go to Vietnam, they didn't want to go to Vietnam. And so as we prepared to go out there in Southern California, there's a whole lot of desert as you go in there towards Arizona, and there was a place called the Salton Sea that had the hot temperatures, the water, and some of the irrigation canals out there had vegetation that was as dense and as problematic as we would encounter in Vietnam. And it was an excellent place to go for pre-deployment training, which we did, again, simulating to the best ability that we had what we were going to encounter in Vietnam, and understanding that you were going to be hot, tired, miserable, etc. Okay, next. So let's, what do we have to do to overcome that, to prepare ourselves for that? So we were prepared. We had respect for each other. You hear about all the fragging of officers who were either shot or killed by some of their own enlisted troops for really stupid reasons. Be that as it may, that doesn't happen in special operations.
Yeah.
I mean, as you've talked about going through SEAL training, and all that pain and agony that we talk about, the enlisted troop is standing right next to the officer. They're getting muddy, cold, right, freezing cold, exhausted, side by side, and that creates a pretty special bond, as well as a knowledge and understanding that he did it right alongside me. We're the same kind of person, different responsibilities, same kind of person, side by side, out there doing it together.
Yeah, still the only one in the Navy or in the military that we have, officer enlisted going through, doing that at the same time. So, amazing how we it's built in, right?
It is.
Yeah. So I guess since we had already mentioned the Silver Star, I want you to describe that and how that all went down that day, and any lesson learned too. That's kind of the big thing. Before you do that, I just want to mention for everybody, you are obviously one of the early founders of SEAL Team proper. We come from the Scouts and Raiders in World War II. That generation is unfortunately dying off, and so now the next is coming. You have tail end of Korea. You have the Vietnam vets as yourself. You have guys like me who've been in and out for over 20 years. We split the difference between pre 9/11, post 9/11, and so one of the really cool things about this program is we get to capture that history, that tribal knowledge that is so valuable to our community. And so, yeah, that's why I'm really wanting to make sure we dive into the SEAL teams a lot today, and getting some of those lessons learned, because a lot of, they're all timeless. And so hopefully some of those future brothers in arms of ours are going to take some of the lessons you described today and apply them so that they don't have to worry about that when they get to that point, hopefully, or in the future, So anyway, yeah, just go over what you got.
Okay. I'll break this into basically into two parts. The bad day at Black Rock on the 30th of January of 1971, and then I'll talk to some of the other things about the teams of the 70s and the some lessons learned.
Absolutely, yeah.
On the 30th of January in 1971, Zulu platoon was on a shore base called Solid Anchor, located on the Kamal River. The Kulon River, down in the. If you look at Vietnam, it's kind of got a tail going down towards the bottom, kind of like Florida going towards Key West. Well, we were right down there, and we'd been there since August. We were leaving in early February. And what you did at that point in time is you started inventorying your gear, cleaning up your gear, getting ready to pack up your gear, So you figure a period of X number of days. Well, my squad had pretty much, packed up their radios, our heavy weapons. We kept our personal weapons, and in my case, my personal weapon was a Stoner light machine gun.
I remember that. I've yet to shoot one of those. I got to shoot one of those one day.
It was I could nail a chicken at 100 yards with a 3-round burst. I mean, you got to feed your pet snake, right?
Yeah, you got it. Yeah.
So
They're hungry.
But going back to the to 71 on the Coulon River down there at Solid Anchor, and we were pretty much ready to go home. The platoon in those days, the SEAL platoon was broken down into 2 squads. You had an OIC and an assistant OIC, and I was the assistant OIC. Well, the lieutenant in charge of the of Alpha Squad wanted to conduct one more operation, and so I was not involved in any of the planning, the mission briefs of that operation at all. They suit up, they load up the helos, and they go away, and we get a radio message that en route to the insertion area, a little bit shy of the insertion area, the helicopter had taken some ground fire. One of the individuals in that squad was wounded, Petty Officer Arroyo, whose success in later years was absolutely amazing. But Marcus was wounded in the shoulder. Helo turns around, comes back to base. We unload the. We get Marcus into the medical facility, the small medical facility we had there, and the lieutenant wanted to continue on and go back to that objective area. Well, Petty Officer Arroyo had been the radioman for that squad. The corpsman, we only had one corpsman in the platoon at the time. The corpsman was my radioman. The corpsman was taking care of Marcus, the other radioman. So there was no radioman. So I said, "Well, Grant, somebody's going to have to carry your ass out of that rights, Patty. I'll take the radio." So as I said, my weapon was a Stoner light machine gun. My nickname is the Hulk. At that point in time, when I went on an operation, I carried 800 or 900 to 1,200 rounds of ammunition for that 5.56 light machine gun.
Yeah.
I mean, insane number. Nobody carries that amount of ammo on a mission. Well, I just about ran out of bullets that day. So we land and we start patrolling to the area where we thought the supply cache was, and we're heading up a rice dike, and we actually started taking fire just about as we landed. We get across the rice paddy, start heading up the rice dike, and we're basically in a kill zone because we're going up the rice dike and we're taking fire from this side of the rice dike and from the other side of the rice dike, and the point man gets wounded, groin shot, chest shot. The LT gets shot in both legs. The automatic weapons man gets shot through the chest, and I got hit in the hand. Can I show him where my war wound?
Absolutely, yeah, for sure. That's the greatest story I ever. I mean, just go ahead and you.
So I was carrying my Stoner, and it's got a pistol grip, and so I've got my hand around the pistol grip, and I'm carrying it like this. It's the old trigger finger. So the bullet went through the end of my thumb, through my middle finger, and they said I was not going to have a thumbnail or a nail on the middle finger, through my palm and out the back. Let me interject right now to say that I am so happy to even be able to tell this story, and damn lucky to be able to tell this story. So I get wounded in the hand, and I look down at my hand, and it's like some fresh cut hamburger, and I see what I thought was the bullet sticking out of the back of my hand. And for our generation, you had people like John Wayne and Clint Eastwood I don't remember if it was Two Mules for Sister Sarah, but in one of his movies, Clint, pulls an arrow out of his shoulder and goes, and I said to myself, well, hey, Clint Eastwood can do it. Tom Richard can do it. So I looked down at my hand and I grabbed what I thought was the bullet between my teeth, and I gave it a good yank. That was one of the bones. It was still attached, and still attached partially to some of the tendons. When I gave a yank on that bone, my toes curled. I swear to God, my toes curled. And the
mine are curling right now. I mean, I've heard it a million times. This is every time you tell it.
it was so crazy. I pull, I wince, I curse, and I said, I'm going to worry about that later. And I couldn't shoot because my weapon, again, as I say, I'm lucky to be alive. My machine gun, the receiver group of the machine gun, had 3 or 4 rounds embedded in it, and it was no longer a working model. That didn't matter because I had the point man, the lieutenant, the automatic weapons man, all down. We had to get them out of that kill zone. So the one of the AWs, Lawrence, saw the lieutenant get hit, and he dragged Grant partway back to the perpendicular rice paddy, and I grabbed Grant and I brought him back the rest of the way over that perpendicular rice paddy to, if you will, the lee. So that rice paddy now formed a mud protective cover for the rounds we were taking from up there. So I left Grant there. And I go back in. Our point man had been shot in the groin and the chest, and he just he wasn't conscious. So I grabbed Rock, nickname Rock, Jim Rowland, later retired as a senior chief, pulled Rock back through the rice paddy and over that next rice dike, and as Lieutenant Telfer had said in the past, he was worried about Jim, and Jim apparently groaned or complained or whatever as I was hauling him over the rice dike, and as Grant recounts later, he said that's the only way he knew that Jim was still alive. And then our M60 guy was shot and through the lung, and he went down and he started calling out, I'm hit. And I could hear what I thought was panic coming into his voice. And the last thing you need is somebody to go into shock in addition to the other wounds that they might have. So in my ever tactful way, I called out to the AW man to shut the F up and return fire. And he reacted to that, and here he is, shot through the lung, returning fire with his M60 machine gun. I helped him get back over the rice dike as well, in addition to the lieutenant and Jim Rowland, and then so we're now in the lee of this rice dike. The fire is coming here. We call for extraction. And those gutsy HAL 3 helo pilots were coming into the LZ, and they were going to pull us out. Well, the guy driving the gunship, good friend of mine, Carl Nelson, thought he was actually going to have to land his helo and let his gunner help move the wounded to the extraction bird, and then Carl sees the slick, the evacuation helo land in the rice dike, and I literally drag the lieutenant, Petty Officer Rowland, and I assist Futrell getting back to the helo. The whole time I'm out there exposed, Petty Officer Lawrence and Petty Officer Hedge, both who had Stoner machine guns as well, are laying down cover fire, trying to keep those heads down over there while I'm exposed, trying to get these guys to the helo.
Did you ever figure out about how many Vietnamese
there were
engaged you?
70 or 80 of the bad guys on the other side. This is what the helo guys said based on what they could see.
Was that NVA or VC?
I don't know.
Don't know. Okay.
So I'm dragging these guys back to the helo, and oh, by the way, I've got soup sandwich from my right hand, and in the other hand I'm dragging the lieutenant. And to Grant's credit, he's still trying to tell me what to do. and I was tuning Grant out, but I had the radio, so I'm talking to the slick who came in to pull us out. I'm talking to Carl up in the helo, calling for fire, and my hard to notice, but the ring finger on the right hand doesn't work very well. So what I had was my index finger and my thumb to squeeze the handset, in order to be able to talk to the helo up there. I'm squeezing the handset with my moderately functioning thumb and forefinger, and in the other hand, I'm dragging 200-pound plus Grant Telfer across the rice paddy, and then the same thing with Jim Rowland, and then we get to the helo, and now I've got to load these guys into the helo. And basically got one hand. So anybody who tells you that powerlifting isn't a good thing to do in preparation for being a SEAL, I did some of the best one-handed lifts I've ever done in my life. So I load those guys in a helo. All the while, Hedge and Lawrence are out there providing cover for me and the helo. And Lawrence yells out, "I'm out of bullets." Well, as I told you earlier, my stoner had been rendered inoperable by the rounds that it took, and I was busy doing other stuff too. So I had a lot of my ammunition left, and in those days, what I did is I would wear what we called the blue and gold T-shirt. I would literally wrap my bandoliers, just like you see in the movies, Pancho Villa with all that crap around his body. But I would wrap those, around my body, overlaying them, and then I would put on a camouflage, uniform shirt to protect those bandoliers from, mud and dirt and so on. So when Lawrence says he's out of bullets, I open my shirt, twist the band, and I pulled a band of 120 or so bullets off my chest, and I threw one bandolier over to Lawrence, and I threw another bandolier over to Hedge, and they continued firing as we were getting ready to get out of there. Yeah. So not only was I significantly exposed going into the kill zone to get those guys, dragging them across the rice paddy, but Hedge and Lawrence are providing cover that whole time.
About what are you talking distance-wise, just so you get some context?
From the rice dike where I dragged the guys to begin with over to the helo was no more than 30 or 40 yards.
Okay. That's a long 30 or 40 yards.
It's a long 30 or 40 yards when I'm dragging a sack of concrete by the name of Telfer or Rowland. Again, as I say, Hedge and Lawrence are providing cover fire that entire time, which, back to my earlier statements, is one of the reasons when Captain Slattery came to me and said he wanted to submit an upgrade, I said, these guys absolutely deserve an upgrade as well. Yeah. So that was, we all got on the helo. We went to the Bintui 3rd Surgical Hospital, and for those of you who've seen MASH, that was MASH right there, And so
anybody in Hawaiian shirt or anything like that?
I don't recall any Hawaiian shirts, but I'm laying
anybody
there.
in a dress walking around? I don't know.
And one of the nurses, just surprisingly, we knew several of the nurses up there. One of the nurses come by and says, "What are you doing here?" I said, "Well, yes, we had a pretty bad day." But since I was the least wounded, I was the last individual to get taken care of. Well,
everybody survived, right?
Absolutely, everybody survived. So Rowland and Futrell were both lung shot. Petty Officer Rowland had another injury, but both of these guys were lung shot. The bullet went through both of these guys didn't hit a bone, didn't hit an artery, and their lungs didn't even collapse. Just absolutely amazing for them to come out like that. I mean, we had a pretty bad day at Black Rock, but we were pretty lucky coming out of it.
Right.
So as I said, I'm the last guy to get fixed, and they gave me a shot in the nerve under my arm to prepare me for surgery. Roll me into surgery. Dr. Stark's working on my arm. They forgot to check to see if that shot worked. The shot didn't work. So he starts debriding breaks out your basic scalpel, starts debriding the wound. And I have no idea what I said to him, but he made a comment about the language I was using. I said, I'll clean up my language as soon as you give me some for the pain in that hand. That block didn't work.
Yeah.
Oh.
Right.
So I feel very fortunate to be able to sit here and we can laugh about this situation in retrospect. Clearly, we were lucky to get out of there with our lives. Petty Officer Hedge and Lawrence are true heroes.
Yeah.
The guy driving the gunship, Carl Nelson, and all those boys from HAL 3 and HAL 5, will always be my heroes.
Yeah.
Captain Slattery started this award review process. We went through a series of interviews, and we provided written statements for the award review board. Interestingly enough, we probably wouldn't have had to go through this review process had we been debriefed before. I'm sure my award would have been upgraded along with Hedge and Lawrence as well. But we for whatever reason, the medevac process, et cetera, we were there in Bin Tui for a couple of days together, and then we were spread out to wherever. So as we go through the process with Captain Slattery, each person would provided some written statements with regard to what they recalled, and I didn't realize it at the time, that is on the 30th of January 1971, until I read Lieutenant Telfer's statement. And in his statement, like I said, I'm dragging him across the rice paddy, and he's still giving me directions. So he was still relatively
Coherent.
coherent at the time. But he was. I mean, he couldn't see much above the top of the top of the rice stalks because I'm dragging. He's shot in both legs. So
Can't walk, yeah.
But so I'm loading Grant into the helo, and I'm pretty sure Grant was conscious of me, not only loading him in the helo, but maybe he was even conscious of me providing the additional ammunition to Hedge and Lawrence. But in Grant's statement, he made the observation that then Lieutenant J.G. Richards was loading us into the helo under heavy enemy fire with no concern or feelings with regard to his own personal safety or exposure. And Grant was absolutely right, but I never thought about that.
Yeah.
I never thought about the fact that what I was doing, I had no concern for my own safety or well-being. You understand how it is in the teams.
Right.
Yeah, you don't leave anybody behind.
Right.
These guys were not going to go to a POW camp. They were coming out. That's the only thought that I had.
Right.
That's a thought that I had. Hedge and Lawrence providing that cover, they did what they did with no regard for their own personal safety. And that is, in my mind, a mindset of the special operating guy. I mean, that was never a concern, a thought that never occurred to me until I read it in Grant's statement. So when you look at the bonds that you form with individuals going through the trials and tribulations of Bud's training, Then you go through the pre-deployment training and hone your skills and techniques and procedures. And now you're over there where there are no timeouts. I mean, it's not even a consideration. That's the kind of force that you have. And that's part of what I meant about my statement about that was not my war, that was not my Navy. We were well trained, we were well conditioned, and the actions of Lawrence, Hedge, and myself on that day were the perfect example of that training, and you do under duress what you are trained to do.
There, we always eat through here where we talk about lessons learned. That is a spectacular description right there. Besides that, and also, and just to be a little bit humorous, besides not biting your bone on your hand when that's one good lesson learned. Also, make sure you got the proper Novocaine going into your arm. Make sure before you debride it. Now, seriously, what are some other takeaways from that operation that you look back on that you may have applied, going forward into the late 70s and early 80s, maybe into your command tour with SEAL Team 1?
A couple of things. The first one on tactics, techniques, and procedures. Make sure that there's some interoperable weapons and ammunition in your element. A lot of guys, back then, wanted to be unique and individual. Yeah. Some guys actually carried AK-47s. Nobody working for me carried an AK-47 because I wanted to have some interoperable weapons. If you're carrying an M16 or an M16 variant, you could always use that same magazine for that weapon. If you got a couple of guys carrying stoners, you can swap out belts of ammunition. A huge lesson learned there. One of the other things, and I'm sure you probably you heard me say it when you were working for me, but as I look at a situation, one of the things that I say to myself is, if something is not right, the question is, what's wrong with this picture? And you stop what you're doing until you figure out what's wrong with this picture. Whether it's a planning factor, a support factor, or something just isn't quite right. You got to say to yourself, what's wrong with this picture, and fix it. Because if you don't, somebody's going to die. Yeah. And in our business, somebody doesn't, just run out of gas on the side of the road. Somebody's going to die. Right. So what's wrong with this picture? And you have to have the strength of conviction to stop what you're doing until you figure out what's wrong with this picture.
Yeah, we talk about industry a lot now, normalization of deviation, and that's what it is. It is. You get your mind, you just start ignoring it, and if you do, fortunately, most people don't have to worry about dying on the side of the road because of it, but it is, something that you have to take care of, or else it's going to bite you in some factor.
Exactly. Yeah. In business today, the terms you just provided, it's the same thing. There's with that deviation, there's clearly something wrong with this picture. What is it? How do we fix this? Right. And I'll go one step further. In business today, to succeed, remember what I was talking about: goal setting, focus, commitment, Absolutely. Dedication, self-sacrifice. Who does that remind you of? Your CEO, the CEO of pick whatever company you're working right. for. That was a hard-working individual who set goals and attained those goals through hard work and discipline. All those factors that we have that contribute to our not only survival in BUDS and the teams, but contribute to our success in the teams. Afterwards, those are the same attributes that it takes for success in business, in my mind.
Absolutely. Yep. 100%. So moving forward a little bit here, got through Vietnam. Now we're getting into the 80s and 90s. And, for the audience out there, especially some of the young frogmen out there, the way they deploy today with your NSW squadrons and such, there's things in place now today that really started with efforts that you and your generation put in. And so this is kind of go through a little bit of your maybe command tour at SEAL Team 1, your time in El Salvador, those kinds of things, the time at the center, and especially Naval Special Warfare Command, as you put some of the like Force 21 things in place that really got it going so that once 9/11 hit, we were ready, right? And I think our body of work, throughout the post 9/11 period, I would put it up against anybody as far as like preparation, the quality of training, the effectiveness on the ground of everybody. So so anyway, let's kind of get back to as you're rolling into the 80s and how things were back then.
Well, the first thing I'm going to do is apologize because we don't have time to cover all that.
Yeah, right on. That's what just hit the highlights. But yeah, some of the things that really goes. What do you kind of want to dive into on that?
A couple of things. It was truly an honor to be the commanding officer of SEAL Team 1. And as the commanding officer of a team, you are responsible for the training and preparation for individuals to go forward and put their lives on the line in a war zone. And while I was a commanding officer of SEAL Team 1, is when we had our first engagement in the Gulf with the escort operation of the U.S. flag ships and so on. So we were once again preparing to send young men into harm's way for national goals. So in the course of that, one of the things that I learned about leadership was something called management by walking around.
Yep.
And we talked a little bit about this last night. One of the things that I had the opportunity to do was to go to a small arms training program with a platoon from my team and a platoon from a good friend, Commander Stubblefield's team. And we got to know and interact with those members of those platoons exceptionally well. And I'm betting you dollars to donuts that every one of those individuals was watching their commanding officer to see, what he did, how he did it, and how he interacted with everybody else, because we were completely away from the team environment at a special training facility, and it was very isolated, and you weren't hiding any warts. So fast forward, some of these folks are in a platoon that was getting ready to deploy, and they had a training event offshore. It was what we call a rubber duck drop, but it's a rubber boat. We spit out the back end of a C-130. Long story short, the parachute rigging for the boat had an error that caused the chute to not deploy, and when that boat went out the back end of that C-130, it fell like a rock. And when you hit water at high speed, it's like hitting concrete. The boat burst. The outboard motor was totaled. We had some radios, communication devices, broken in the process. Not a good thing, but that's one of the reasons you call it training. So the next morning, I come in about 7 o'clock at the SEAL Team 1 compound and get ready for the start of the day. The command day would start at 7:30. Well, about 7:15 in the morning, the parachute rigger who had rigged that boat for the drop the night before, that parachute rigger bangs on my door, walks into my office, and apologizes to the commanding officer. He was one of the guys that had been at that shooting school, and that management by walking around. Here I had an E5 petty officer coming into the commanding officer, an O5, coming into the commanding officer's office, unbidden. Nobody was chewing on his ass at the time, unbidden, and apologizes to the commanding officer. That was one of my favorite moments as a commanding officer of SEAL Team 1. That told me that I had established a certain level of communication and respect within the members of SEAL Team 1. So that was born out of management by walking around.
Yeah. A guy felt comfortable enough to go into your office, confess his soul, like I said, unbidden.
Yep.
And that the level of trust and confidence that you would take that into account and go on about his day. Yeah, that's tremendous.
And he said, Skipper, that will never happen again.
Did it?
Not to my knowledge.
No, that's right. Exactly. And I messed up, and I'm going to fix it, right? And that's something that you can't. That just makes there's no level of money that replaces something like that.
Truly.
Yeah.
So that's one thing about leadership and management that I wanted to cover.
Yep.
But another thing, you mentioned Afghanistan, the teams in the 80s. I'm going to take this a little bit further. After I had retired, I came out to the West Coast, and we were just. I came out to the West Coast for a West Coast reunion. And one of the things that we were fortunate to do, we had the current commander of Naval Special Warfare addressing the attendees, which is a great thing for those guys to do, to take their time on the weekend and do that. So the admiral is talking to all the attendees at this reunion, and he makes some observations about how we are working in Afghanistan, how we are learning to deal with the village elders and the tribal leaders, and how you go about establishing that trust with regard to the presence of U.S. forces, and he couched it in a way. This was a whole new deal. And I'm standing there knowing that he had some retired E9 Vietnam vets, retired warrant officer Vietnam vets on his staff who did exactly the same damn thing. And it was distressing to me to hear him couch it in the terms that he did, because we had obviously not carried those lessons forward for that type of conflict.
Yeah.
Now, in today's day and age, given the vast disparities of progress and relative standards of living across the world and between countries, some of those things are going to happen again. Unfortunately, the solution to the providing the equity and the standards of living, et cetera, are going to be supposedly resolved through war, which I don't agree with, but it's going to happen again, and there's going to be a certain amount of disparity in the weapon sophistication of one element versus the other, and so we're always going to have to deal with that human element, with that tribal leader, with that village elder. I see that going on for years, and we need to keep that focus as we look at the concerns in the world today that we have about the potential for conflict with a peer competitor.
I was going to get into that. Yeah.
And that's so we need to have that counterinsurgency, counterterrorism, capability in our kit bag, and we can't lose that. But we're also going to have to look at those peer competitor challenges. Let me say one thing about the peer competitor challenge. Today, we have an ugly conflict going on the other side of the world between Russia and the Ukraine.
Right.
I was a geography major in Villanova. Now I know that was in the 60s, but nothing's changed. The Soviet Union is still looking for warm water port access.
Of course.
They want to go through Ukraine. They want to have that access to the navigation around the world.
Of course.
And free trade and all that other stuff. I feel like the leaders of the free world have failed us, all the members of the free world, because we weren't able to figure out how to get this guy Putin the opportunity to drive his trucks and his trains to a port and make some kind of a trade agreement, and we'd have people in the Ukraine getting rich, people in Russia getting rich off of all this trade. But now what we're going to do is we're going to have to rebuild Ukraine when Russia runs out of bullets.
Right. And that was the one thing we've been really kind of pulling our hair out over is where's the peace negotiation, right? Because there's a way to do this to it that everybody's going to gain versus at this point everybody's going to lose. And then you got the other peer competitor in the eastern side of the world with China, right?
Yeah.
And so I think you hit it on the head with the peer-to-peer potential out there. You still can't, no matter how big that threat is, you still can't lose the tribal knowledge of how to deal with people on the ground. And fortunately, a lot of our training we do with our counterparts around the world, it gives you access to those types of environments to where you shouldn't lose that capacity, given the opportunities we have around the world, the training we have.
And to your point, with that training around the world, as you and I sit here today, there are special operations forces in 70 or 80 countries around the world, many of them doing that, I'll call it, peer-to-peer contact, training with each other, or us, training some countries who are looking for that counterterrorism, counterinsurgency capability on their own. But the biggest thing, to your point, is we're establishing those relationships, continuing to use that same philosophy that came back out again in Afghanistan. Should have transitioned from Vietnam, but we can't lose that.
Right. And so looking forward, not only to the peer competitors, but the future of the SEAL teams. Just from looking from your point of view, I spent 2 years of my life in Afghanistan and watched a lot of things develop there. One of the challenges we had and how we met that, I think, really well. We have things like cultural support teams. Just for the audience's benefit, we basically embedded 2 women into a platoon, and that pair of women were able to engage the other half of the population in Afghanistan that a male definitely could not. And so some of the value we saw in that was just off the charts, right? And became an integral part of what we were doing out in Afghanistan. Moving forward, I mean, you look at, we talked a little bit about this last night, but Secretary Carter, January 2016 had opened up all combat specialties, because before that, by law, women could not apply to the SEAL teams. Opening all that, when Secretary Carter actually opened up everybody to be able to at least try out, like we were talking last night. Initially, I was, of course, I'm an old guy, so I'm a little bit resistant. But thinking about the NFL has no, rules and regulations preventing women from joining. So anybody with the capability can try out for the NFL. If you got what it takes, you can be on the playing field and make a whole lot of money doing it. And so I think, conceptually, all of us in the SEAL teams are all about getting the job done. And if you can get the job done, no one's going to really care. So no one's made it yet. But we do have some females that have made it into the SWIC community, right? On the Army side, you got a couple that have graduated Ranger School. I think they had one graduated in 2022 for the Air Force Special Tactics Squadron. And so we're seeing the trickle coming in. Is that going to be a major part moving forward? Or what else do you see that might be the future of recruiting, training, makeup of the SEAL teams and maybe special operations in general? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, you've got to have that same person. Focus, commitment, dedication, sacrifice, goal setting. Got to have that same person. And I think whoever came up with that idea to utilize women as a cultural support element in that particular culture, religion, way of life, no male was going to have access to 50% of the population. Right. And so I was not there, but I've got to imagine that those women provided some incredible information and insight to what was going on in and around that particular geographic area. A really great idea of how to solve the problem of getting access to that part of the population. That's kind of what special operations is, and I'll get back to that. Those women were not what we would call door kickers.
Right.
In naval special warfare, there have been some eggheads in the past that have decided that that our training is not correctly oriented, and there's no reason for all that upper body strength.
Why do you need to do pull-ups, Tom? Seriously.
Why do you need to be able to do about 20 pull-ups? Because you're going to have to haul your bony ass and another 50 or 60 pounds of weapons and ammunition up that cargo net or up that caving ladder. And yes, if you do it right, your legs provide most of the thrust. But what if you slip and fall? Oh, I can't do a pull-up. And all of a sudden you fall off the cargo net. I don't mean to be disrespectful, but you need to be able to do a pot full of pull-ups to climb that cargo net, to climb that caving ladder. And have you ever seen anybody doing any fast roping? What are you doing in fast rope? You got these 2 beer can openers latched on to that fast rope, and it attaches to your arms and rest of your body. You are using that method of insertion for a reason. And in order to do that, you have to have certain physical capabilities. And so, there are probably some triathletes out there who can do that. But then we get back to that, dedication. Are they going to be dedicated to that particular employment option? And if you're not, don't apply. So you've got that question out there. There are not very many women who are going to be able to do that. I am amazed and astounded at the skills and capabilities of gymnasts. And I know every one of those from Simone Biles on down. I'm sure those women can rip off 15, 20, 30 pull-ups. Because look what they do.
Right.
The high bar, and propelling their bodies through the air, the vault. Those women are in damn good shape.
They're also going to get paid a lot more doing that than they would.
They are, but
this has been the worst get-rich-quick scheme I ever had in my life.
and those ladies aren't running 4 miles in boots either. So you take all that, and it sort of levels the playing field. And one of the so when these people say you don't need that upper body strength, I say come along for a couple of platoon operations, and we'll make sure that there's a safety net down there for when you fall off the cargo net.
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge that I think we ever saw, and hopefully, and I think you agree, is that it's not whether or not somebody can do it. It's the temptation, even when it was an all-male force, to lower the standards, and it's constant.
Cannot lower the standards.
But it's the pressure's there constantly.
And that's why we're called Special Operations Forces. The symbol of U.S. SOCOM is a spearhead on a shaft, and the name of the quarterly or semi-annual magazine that they put out is called The Tip of the Spear.
Right.
We are that tip of the spear. We have to be that most capable element. There are all kinds of other locations for people who don't have the physical skills. There are people that sit there in an IT environment. They don't need to do those pull-ups. And to have the Naval Special Warfare Qualification Training Program to put somebody in CIC is not going to happen. Conversely, you can't take that person who is physically well adapted for that environment and put them in a SEAL platoon or a Special Forces A team. You need that person who is going to be the tip of the spear. A couple of the things that I just like to highlight, one because I'm a weightlifter, is the world male record for a deadlift, which is bending over, picking up a bar loaded with weight, and standing up straight bringing that bar to your waist. The world record for the men is something like 1,100. That's 1,104 pounds.
Yeah.
I never deadlifted more than 575, and people thought I was strong. The world record for a woman is 641 pounds. And that is a very large woman that is doing it. Very strong woman, an athlete, and clearly an accomplished athlete in her sport. 641 pounds.
Right.
You know,
right.
You know, we're talking somewhat just under a 500-pound difference.
Right.
The women's record for the 1,500 meters is somewhere around 3 minutes and 49 seconds. The men's record for the 1,500 meters is 3 minutes and 26 seconds. Mm-hmm. We're talking 23 seconds. You can have a beer and a hamburger waiting for that person to catch up to you, in 26 seconds.
Right.
I'm being facetious.
Right.
But you need to have the tip of the spear, because when things go to hell in a handbasket, and by the way, I've got to drag these two guys across the rice paddy with my left hand because my right hand is hamburger. You want somebody who has that capability to do that. So I'm talking to standards. Yeah. We need to maintain those standards because our national command authorities are going to put our special operations forces in some of the most trying circumstances that there are going to be seen in military combat. You have to have the best of the best. Right. That's the reason that I say you can't change the standards. Right. I actually got out of competitive weightlifting before the women were able to lift more than I could. Thank God I can say that out loud. But that's because I got out of competitive weightlifting a long time ago. But can't change the standards. You gotta, if you want to have an organization identified as the world's premier special operations, whether you're talking SEAL Team 6, the Army's Delta equivalent, or whatever they're calling those organizations today, they have to be the best there is. Now, let's talk about special operations. Earlier, we talked about Vietnam and some of the similarities going on to Afghanistan with regard to the to working with the local civilians. And I said, after that we're going to have to continue to do those kinds of things. But weapons and tactics and procedures are going to change. Yeah. I'm not wearing a watch that you can find me just by
neither am I
checking the
mechanical
the electronic emissions.
No batteries.
But, if you've got a Fitbit or a smart watch or whatever it is, somebody can pinpoint you right now exactly where you might happen to be. Yeah. That's a hell of a change from when I went to Southeast Asia.
Right. Thermals, all that. Drones. We've seen that drones in Ukraine right now. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So those kinds of things have changed. But how are they using those drones in the Ukraine? Mm-hmm. What are they? What weapons intercepts are people doing? Those are some of the finer points of special operations that are going to evolve over time. Now you've used this drone with a special set of instrumentation to give you a piece of information. At some point, you're probably going to have to put boots on the ground, as the expression goes, right. And they have to be the best. And or maybe in order to get that set of sensors and instruments position in order to do what we want them to do, you're going to need special operations to go somewhere that is, uninhabitable, inaccessible to the average human being, and emplace that particular device or sensor. So what we do in special operations may change over time. We might not be rescuing that Army truck driver that we did years ago, but we're going to be doing something that is different. I worked with General Downing, who was at one time one of our commanders of all of U.S. Special Operations. And working with him, I got to understand why you had special operations. Everybody can't do what special operations does. Now, if you've got a person in the 10th Infantry or whatever it might be, and he is a highly capable individual, you take him out of the 10th Infantry, you give him all that training, fine, he can become a special operator. But that's what it takes, because they have a different skill set. They are asked to do separate things. Special operations is a subset of the overall requirements. And if you're going to have the capability to do that, the people and the equipment and the training has to be special too.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite sayings I heard is, process is more important than the outcome. What I mean by that, it takes 2.5 years to make a SEAL. Before you're going through BUDS, going through SQT now, and then get into your deployment, pre-deployment time. 2.5 years from start before you even see the door going out to your first deployment. And I always make even when I'm talking to the civilian sector about leadership and things like that, I get into the processes and comments about processes, and I was like, you don't change that. That's going to stay the same, because you can't not do that and be prepared. You have a certain amount of preparation time, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So anything we're looking at we got back 3 more segments before we close it out here. So but any last word we're thinking about as far as like the SEAL teams before we get into the last couple of segments? We're looking at, I think we've probably can say that the person's not going to change. The process probably isn't going to change, but the threat's definitely going to change. You have, like one of my clients, they're in the oil and gas business, but they live in Texas. And so the pigs have gotten so smart down there that they only come out at night. And so he's got thermal imaging on suppressed ARs. So this is a civilian sector, right?
Yeah.
And they're better equipped than we were. But that's what we're going to face. Though is you look at Ukraine, you got those drones going everywhere. You got people getting supplied with the thermal imaging. You get people that know tactics. So you can go online, you can look at any given YouTube and at least get a baseline on a whole lot more than a baseline on tactics to deploy. And so I think to your point, you got to be even sharper than we ever have been in order to compete, not only with a peer, but just going into anywhere else, right?
You take that dedicated, focused individuals with the goals of being the best that they are and looking to overcome those new challenges. There's going to be that small subset of challenges that you can't have the entire Navy, the entire Army working on that. You can't spend the money to train 300,000 people to do that. It might work for 3,000 or 4,000 people, but not 300,000 or 400,000 people. Right. So that's one of the reasons why you have special operations.
Yes, sir. Okay, so good segue here. One segment I always call is Phoenix. So we've all had those opportunities in life, I call them, where let's just say you didn't meet the male, right? And or you hit rock bottom. You have one of those type of scenarios you want to describe for us? One, hitting rock bottom, but then what did you do to get out of that and recover?
Well, whether it was rock bottom or sour grapes, I used to have I used to wrestle in addition to to my weightlifting, and I developed a move in high school where, coming from the position on the mat, if your opponent stood, instead of fighting the opponent, yada yada, I said, "Hey, fine, you want to stand? We'll stand." So I would stand up, pick them up off the ground, and return them to the mat. Now the rule used to read yada, and I complied completely with the rule. Well, one time I pulled my move on a guy who should never have been on a wrestling mat. He had had a couple of concussions during the football season, and so when I returned him to the mat relatively forcefully, he just kind of laid there. That was shocking to me, and again, my move was completely legal. I wasn't trying to pull any dirty moves or anything like that. Long story short, a bunch of officials sort of thought that Mrs. Richards' little boy Tommy was a bit of a jackass, and so I moved forward. I don't remember what my record was. My senior year was pretty good. I win the division. I'm going to the counties, and a similar kind of thing happens, where I grab this guy to take him down, and he gets away, and he lands on the mat before I did. But I ran around, got behind him, got control for a quote takedown. Mm-hmm. I should have gotten 2 points. Next thing I hear is the whistle blowing. Things are stopping, and I get penalized for unnecessary roughness because this guy got away from me. Long story short, I lost the match. And at the end of the match, as I'm heading over towards the official, I hear this voice in the stands go, "Thomas." It was my father. I stopped, and I turned around and went back over and talked to my father instead of the official. That ended my wrestling career because that was my senior year and so on and so forth. But what I took away from that was these people in a position of influence and authority made a completely wrong judgment, and their application of that affected a young kid who was working within the rules and was trying to do his best. I didn't go on to the States. The kid that ended up beating me in that match took like second in the States, and I'm saying, Jesus, I could have been New York State champion. History. If that had happened, I'd have had a few other wrestling scholarship awards, and I might not have made it to Villanova or Naval Special Warfare. So,
right, yeah.
From one perspective, you could say that guy did me a favor. But I looked at that as a misuse of authority, and I said to myself, I will do whatever I can in my life if I am successful, and I get to a position of authority to make sure that I don't abuse it. I want to take care of my people. I want to, respect my people. I want to give them the opportunity to succeed. When one is in a position of leadership and authority, you have more responsibilities than just whatever the goals and objectives of the company, organization, the military unit. You've got a responsibility to each and every one of those individuals working for you. When I was a commanding officer of Naval Special Warfare Command, it was a lot smaller than it is now. I think we only had 5,500, 6,000 people, and today we're up over 9 or whatever it is.
Right.
But one of the things that I would say is, as a commander of Naval Special Warfare, I work for 5,500 people. I have 5,500 people that I'm working for. Is the way that I approach that. I remember one of the all hands meetings that I had. I said, folks, as you might appreciate, my days get pretty busy, and I want to apologize to you for the amount of time that it takes for me to be dealing upward with the chain of command above me, doing the things that I need to do for the community, and not having the opportunity to reach down and take care of some of those other needs that you have. But I work for 5,500 people.
Yes, sir, you did. That was that was one of the funnest things. I remember I told you this, but I really tried to avoid that job. And Bill Reed had walked into the office when I was fat, dumb, and happy as the operations officer there at SEAL Team 5, and he goes, "Hey Wes, I'm going to put you in for this," because I saw the message come out for asking for volunteers. All right, whatever, and I didn't think anything about it. The next thing I know, I'm got the loop on my shoulder. What? This is not the plan. But working for you and watching how you did what you just described. Really, just from a young lieutenant standpoint, it really impacted me. But I do remember going, I don't want your job. At that point, I was like, I'm a lieutenant. I don't need that. But you talk about a learning opportunity and just seeing how you dealt with people. That's one thing I've respected most of the thing about you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and well deserved. All right, so Yeah, before we move on, I know you wanted to talk about El Salvador for a little bit, so let's get into El Salvador. That's a really cool operation, honestly.
El Salvador in the mid '80s was a dangerous place to be. There were there was an insurgent movement, going on in the country, and there were parts of the country where an American couldn't go, parts of the country where certain Salvadorans couldn't go. And the reason I got the job in El Salvador was because the Navy SEAL who had been assigned to the job in the military advisory group in El Salvador was assassinated in 1983. When I heard that, there wasn't a whole hell of a lot going on around the world, so I said, "Well, that sounds like a exciting place to be." No disrespect to Lieutenant Commander Schaffelberger, but I said to myself, I think I'd like to get down there where life is on the leading edge and see what's going on.
Tom, just for the audience benefit, what was the actual job down there? Just to...
I was I had two jobs. I was a senior Navy advisor, and I was the deputy mill group commander.
Okay.
And I have to say that I allowed the senior Navy advisor job to devolve to the OIC of the mobile training team, and they spent their life down there at the naval facility on the Gulf of Fonseca. So when Lieutenant Commander Schaffelberger got killed, I said to myself, that's a part of the world that is on the leading edge, and I'd like to go down there. And so I called up the detailer, who's a military placement officer. I called up the detailer and I said, I'd like to volunteer to go down and replace Al. And there were a couple of requirements for that. You had to speak Spanish. They wanted somebody with a boat background. They wanted somebody with SEAL background. Well, I had 2 out of 3. Spanish is what I didn't have. So I volunteer, and apparently there was not a long list of volunteers. So the mill group commander said, "Hey, this guy's a volunteer. He wants to come down here. He can learn Spanish while he's here." And so Colonel Joseph Stringham, said, "Okay, send Richards." So I ended up down there in El Salvador. It was an amazing opportunity. I got to go down to a place that was the leading edge of what's going on. Front page headlines in the newspapers at least once a week. And most of the time it was something bad going on down in El Salvador. Somebody getting killed, somebody getting kidnapped, those kinds of things. Bomb goes off here, bridge gets blown up here. But it was front page headline news in the United States. So I went down there and worked with one of the best teams of foreign service officers that you'll ever find. Absolutely great people. Ambassador Pickering, Thomas Pickering, who was later the United States ambassador to the United Nations, was our ambassador at the time. Ambassador Pickering sort of had a residence there in Salvador, but Ambassador Pickering had to travel back and forth to the United States on a regular basis, and provide reports back to the president, to the Secretary of State, to the Secretary of Defense, and coordinate any number of activities back there. So, in an embassy, you have something that they call the country team. It's just like in a military organization. You get your department heads together and you go over what you're doing, where you're going, what your problems might be. Can I help you when you get commander's guidance? And in this case, the commander was Ambassador Pickering. Well, that would have normally been the mill group commander, but Joe Stringham was probably still is, to say the least, hyperkinetic. You couldn't nail his feet to the ground if you tried. He was high speed, moving from place to place. His energy level and how he worked with the Estado Mayor, which is the equivalent to our quote Joint Chiefs of Staff. Colonel Stringham was over there on a regular basis, making sure that Ambassador Pickering's directives and the desires and the policy of the Secretary of State and the President were being carried out because there were accusations of inappropriate tactics and behavior on the part of some of the Salvadoran forces, and Colonel Stringham was doing his damnedest to make sure that that didn't happen. So as a result of that, Colonel Stringham was frequently out of the building, so I got to go to a number of those country team meetings. So you go to one of these country team meetings, and Ambassador Pickering is just coming back from a trip to the United States, where he has sat down and he's talked to and reported back to the Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense, because we were getting an incredible amount of foreign aid money that was being spent down there, and of course he would have these personal sessions with the president, and I'm guessing the Secretary of State was there most of those times as well. So Ambassador Pickering would come back down to El Salvador. We'd have our next country team meeting, and here you are, Mrs. Richards' little boy Tommy, sitting in this room with the guy who just had a conversation with the President of the United States the day before yesterday. And he's saying to his staff, his team, he's saying the President is really pleased with how we're doing this, that, and the other thing. The President wants us to focus. And I'm saying, holy smokes. Yeah, here I am sitting this close.
You really said holy smokes?
No, I did not say holy smokes. not on your life. Did not happen. But here I am, this close, watching how national policy is formed and executed, and I'm working with these individuals in the Foreign Service who are working with us, the military advisory group, trying to make these things happen. And it was a hell of an experience.
Yeah. So this is I'd forgotten one thing I wanted to bring up too. With you, I'm not sure, we never really talked about it, but watching the videos of the fall of Saigon, right? So Congress had cut funding for the Vietnam War. We watched that debacle go down in the 70s. And, I already mentioned I'd spent a lot of time in Afghanistan. I watched that debacle go down, in the 2020s. And you talk about national policy. Do you take, what did you see from either one or both of those situations, besides being a national embarrassment? What are some commonalities of why those things happen from your perspective? And is there anything we can do, as a country moving forward to kind of get over that to a certain extent? I knew when I watched, just as on a personal note, when I watched Afghanistan fall, it was like a gut punch. Why? And so I can imagine, what Saigon falling for you was. We got to get over that. So I'm kind of would like to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, in both cases, Saigon and Afghanistan, from my own personal exposure, commitment, and experience, and yours, people died over there. Americans died over there in the interests of foreign policy. Americans died in Afghanistan in the interests of foreign policy and international relations. How do we really want the world to work? In both cases, the politicians decided that the American public had lost their tolerance for whatever the national goal might have been. And in both cases, the exit strategy sucked. We got outsmarted by the Vietnamese at the conference table in France at the time, and we also, I want to be careful here. I don't think that the military and the intelligence organizations got outsmarted. What we had were some ridiculous deadlines and restrictions placed upon us. And when I see a report that a sniper requested permission to take out the bomber that cost the lives of all those Marines in the course of that extraction. People don't understand what war is.
Yeah.
War is folks trying to kill you, and these are fanatics. We have attempted to go someplace to do something for another nation, another bunch of people. Yes, I'm sure there would be some benefits in some way, shape, or form for the United States government, but the only land that we have in any way ownership of following World War II are the cemeteries over there. We don't go somewhere to take over another country. We don't go somewhere to change the entire geographics of the world. Maybe that's exactly what we're trying to do. But we are not going over there with the intent to make Afghanistan the 51st state of the Union.
Right.
That's not the plan. We were actually trying to help somebody. And oh, by the way, now that we've left, what's the Taliban done? Closed the schools,
right.
Put the put the women back in the entire body encasing clothing. I mean, it's a culture that I do not understand. One of the smartest people that I know is my wife. You probably, she had a full scholarship for her master's degree and in audiology, and she had a full scholarship, room, board, tuition, the works for her doctorate to Stanford University, which she passed on in order to go to work. Thank God. She went to work in San Diego, so I met her there. But my point is that women bring a lot to the world.
Yeah.
And, here we have a culture that has totally stomped all over them. I'll use the woke thought process and approach to life, but hey, look what your actions did. You wanted to get us out of Afghanistan. You wanted us to get out of one of these forever wars, and you had somebody there was no reason to trust at all telling you how women's rights were going to be maintained, etc. What kind of stuff are you going to believe? Everybody knew what was going to happen. So I'm really disappointed in us for doing what we did to those people who had become, I don't want to say Americanized, I want to say who had been given freedoms and opportunities that they didn't have before the Taliban, or actually before the Taliban, it was the Muslim clerics and so on. Right. Things had evolved to a nature where human beings were being treated like human beings.
Yeah, 20 years with people. So there's a lot of people that grew up had no idea who the Taliban were, what they would do.
Right.
In Kabul, especially, and then all of a sudden it came back. We talked about it last night, but it's like I know people that were involved in all that, and I know they had the even my wife, God, she was awesome. She's looking at the TV going, why aren't they at Bagram? And just a casual observer going, why aren't they at Bagram? So if somebody who's a casual observer can recognize that course of action right away, obviously I know the people that were planning it knew what to do, and I know they had multiple courses of action going up to the National Command Authority, and we ended up with, I don't know which plan it was. So I would encourage, I'm just going to, my foot stomper today, encourage all my buddies, let's write that Washington Post editorial at some point, will you? And think about doing the right thing so that we don't have that happen and 13 kids don't lose their lives because of unable to take a sniper shot, right?
Right. Yeah. So that said, so many people talk about certain tragedies, natural disasters, and the fire in Maui recently is one of the best cases, and they talk about it being a war zone. I have to express my concern with the use of that term. It is truly devastating. It's a truly desolate area following the fire. But in a war zone, people are getting shot, people are getting killed, buildings are being demolished. There is no infrastructure. There is no food and water for those people who have been displaced that are lucky enough to be alive that have been displaced. There is no sanitation. There is no medical. And who knows what disease is going to become rampant with the lack of sanitation, medical, food, water, electricity.
Right.
It all cascades. When we here in the United States and so many other countries around the world have a natural disaster, you have Mercy chefs. They're on an airplane with food to feed the thousands. There are medical teams, Doctors Without Borders and other folks. You have every state, nation search and rescue group ready to go in. When you have the hurricane in Florida, you've got thousands of utility vehicles stationed in states around the path of the hurricane, ready to come in and provide some level of assistance. It is the desolation, deprivation, and pain and agony actually suffered in a war zone is so great. It pains me to hear people talking about that when Americans complain that 12 hours have passed and Mercy chefs haven't arrived, or we don't have anywhere to live. Well, you can't transport 15,000 mobile home units in 24 hours. But FEMA and other organizations are working to do just that. Right. They're working to provide you, no cost, some place to live. It doesn't happen in a war zone. Right. Pet peeve, sorry.
No, it's all good. Actually, it's a good segue. So given all the angst we just described, I like the one segment I call cleansing your soul. So for me, everybody knows I love to surf. I get in the ocean, and I don't care how bad a day I've had, getting in and out of the water. It even could be a bad day surfing, but getting out of the water, I'm literally and metaphorically cleansed, right? So what do you do to kind of bring you back to the center and actually, enjoy life versus complaining about it like we've been doing last half hour or so?
Weightlifting.
Yeah. Okay.
And I want to talk about another aspect of weightlifting, but
yeah.
When you walk up to a bar, like I said a little while ago, 1,104, and the guy who lifted that deadlift would probably weighed something like 350 or 375 pounds his own self, which is a lot more muscle mass than I ever had.
Right.
Be that as it may, that's amazing. When they lift that kind of weight, the bar bends. A steel bar.
I watched it actually.
Over an inch. The bar bends. I mean, really?
Yeah.
That's what some human beings are capable of. Yeah. In my case, getting out there, I've got one new knee. One knee needs to be replaced. A few ruptured discs in my back, so I can't do what I used to do. But when you get everything together, when you get correctly positioned, and I can remember the day that I did my 550-pound deadlift and my 575-pound deadlift. Each of those times, the bar just levitated off the floor, because I had everything right. I had my mind right. I had my body positioned right. I was completely focused, and I drove the weight up off the floor. And it's one of those things that it felt so good that I said, Jesus, I should have had another 25 or 30 pounds on that bar. But it probably wouldn't have been the same lift. The mind wouldn't have been in the same place. But it's amazing for me to do that lift, have it come up off the floor, and it was hard, but it wasn't a killer. I said, man, that felt good. I am proud of myself. I had a pretty successful day here, and today, I'd be happy to do that with 300 pounds. But, all said, to be able to do that is, really, is truly a feel-good moment. But you take that weightlifting, and, I'm 76 years old. I can't lift what I used to lift, but I can do the chores around the house. I don't have to, hire somebody to do the lawn, and I'm very thankful for that. But I don't have to grab a machine to open the lid on a jar that seems to be hard. Doesn't sound like much, but that quality of life that comes from taking care of yourself to the best of your ability is huge. So if anybody's listening to this, keep a routine of physical activity. I use the term consistency over time. I keep doing what I can do, and life is pretty good.
It just popped in my head. You remember what you told me like the first week I was working for you, and you called me and, hey Wes, and I was like, yes sir, and he goes, you want to know what's going to get you fired? You remember this?
No.
So
I can imagine where you're going.
And I'm going, boss, that'd be a good thing to know. Yeah. And you looked at me and he goes, don't plan a workout for me any day. I was like, noted. So guess my first question to you every day was, when do you want to do your workout?
Yeah,
that I'll never forget that. What's going to get you fired? And,
I had an aide. I don't know if you ever met Susan Hay, Air Force.
Yeah, I remember Susan. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. If somebody got on Susan's bad side, what she would do is she would, get that person, FaceTime with me 5 or 10 minutes before I was scheduled to go to my workout. She shared that with me later. I just had to laugh my ass off because, okay, you're out of time, pal.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and get into the last segment. So your top 3 scars. What are your top 3 lessons learned in life, and why are they? What is it?
Well, one of them I'm afraid we've already discussed a little bit, and that was my introduction to the abuse of authority by people and exercising that authority incorrectly, as I felt severely wronged in my wrestling career, and I have tried to make sure that I do not, or in my past have not abused that authority. The second one isn't necessarily a scar, but a huge lesson learned, and that is that everybody is different. People say we're all created equal. Yeah, we might be created equal, but we're created equally different. There's no two of us that are the same.
Right.
And from that, everybody provides a different perspective, a different skill set, level of knowledge to whatever particular challenge you're addressing. And I say that it was really brought home to me when I was the commander at WARCOM, but I've been practicing this for a long time. But I was sitting there in the morning message meeting, going over the day's routine, and a difference of opinion arose between the N3, the operations guy, and the N1, the admin person. And I remember having a offline discussion with the operations guy, saying, "Hey, those folks in admin who take care of all your details are your friend. They are part of the team. They might not be wearing a Naval Special Warfare device. They're part of the team. You have to understand, you can't go to East Jesus or Outer Jabip unless they get the plane scheduled. The logistician gets the plane scheduled. The admin folks get the per diem straightened out, and where are you going to stay? It's a team effort. There were some folks who, because they might have been in charge or wearing the Budweiser, were not giving those other individuals the respect that they should. So, as I say, in my mind, We're all created different. And that means that we all provide something different and unique to any problem set. So, as you know, in a platoon, the communicator, the guy who's got logistics, the guy who's got weapons, the air ops guy, they all provide a significant part into your planning as a platoon commander. And they'll bring up things that you might have heard about a long time ago, but you forgot about it because you got so much else on your mind, which is exactly why you're taking advantage of all these people. Right. That's one of the key lessons that I learned early in life. Everybody has something different to contribute. People are going to have different perspectives. It doesn't make it right or wrong. But at another organization, I had gone out. We had this letter we had to provide an answer to, and I had brought it up at one of my morning meetings in this other organization, and I said, folks, this is what I think, we need to answer the question, and this is the approach that I think that I want to take. Please take a look at this and give me your feedback and your input so that I can get all that and make the answer work. The due date comes, I get the input that the folks that provided the input had, and I looked at it and I provided the response, and so letter went off, and I think it was to Warcom, and it gets put in the general read file, if you will. Mr. Smuckatelli raises her hand at the next meeting and says, "Oh, this is wrong. This is what do you mean?" "Well, this, and this." And I said, "Why didn't you provide that to me when I asked?" And I bit my tongue for saying that out loud in the meeting. I said, I had put out a request for information, because when you're the leader, what you need is the input from all those folks. I briefly mentioned management by walking around, getting out there, seeing what your people are doing, the conditions and circumstances they're doing whatever it might be under. Mm-hmm. You have to know those things, and people doing whatever task it might be in the organization, they're going to know something about that task that you don't. Right. It's going to be a complete surprise to you. It's going to happen in every organization, and in this case, it was unfortunate, but I took her input because it was so important. I took her input and I sent off a revised document. I ate the horseradish, and I dealt with it. But it was so important. So you've got to get that information from the people who work for you. It's going to make the organization function better. It's going to make you more successful, and it's going to take pressure off of you as the leader. Right. So that's not exactly a scar, but there were
close.
a couple of times when it could have been painful. But I can't come up with a third one, Wes. I looked.
That's all right. Two's good. As long as you get it's good to go from me. Any last things you want to talk about, or things you want to, like a charity you want to mention, or any group you want to kind of have a shout out to?
Oh, there's several things I'd like to mention, but I think we've at least covered the surface, or the peak of many of those things. I would like to say that I was really impressed with the foreign service officers I had the opportunity to serve with in El Salvador. There's just too many of them to mention, and they did a hell of a job under some pretty crappy circumstances. I remember one night we had security forces down there, but everybody in the capital city of San Salvador, working out of the embassy building, knew Tom Richards. And I had established some good relationships with a few folks. And one night, this couple, now at that point in time, the foreign service officers were bringing their families to El Salvador. The military advisory group and the attaché people did not. So I had made pretty good friends of a couple by the name of Ward and Kathy, and they had a daughter. I think they might have had 2 kids, and for some reason, Ward and Kathy had servants at the house because you wanted to make sure that the people that you had working at the house were cleared and safe to be around. And they had the embassy had a security element on call and so on. I forget exactly what the situation was, but my relationship with Ward and Kathy was their kids got on the radio. They didn't call embassy security; they called Tom Richards, and I was over there in a heartbeat. And it was late at night, but they were some pretty motivated and very highly capable people doing a tough job in some pretty tough circumstances. That was one of my favorite jobs in the world.
All right, well, Tom, thank you so much. It's been a true pleasure get to reconnect with you and have you on the show. And don't be a stranger.
Count on it, Wes.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.
You bet.